Hello! Today we're going to be talking about a little game called Tapestry, where you try and record the entirety of human history on a 90-minute Maxwell tape. I mean, I suppose you could try and interpret this title as Tapestry, but that would just be silly. I mean, who's going to try and record the entirety of human history on what is effectively a glorified curtain? It just wouldn't work.
Tape's upside down. You don't care.
Yeah, I'll be fine. In Tapestry, you will be handed a civilization. You might get something like the Merrymakers, an entire culture founded on the long-standing English tradition of getting pissed. They're essentially the future people from that Time Machine movie, because as the game goes on, they just get free things to enjoy, without having to do any real long-term planning. Who needs planning when you're mostly drunk? Or maybe you'll play as the Mystics, your entire goal of the game predicting at the very start how well you will do. If you predict correctly, you will get a lot of points, inevitably doing better than you originally predicted. Whatever you end up with, you'll once again dip into board gaming's favorite thematic renaissance, the rise of civilizations. And whilst Tapestry doesn't really ring true of that theme from a gameplay perspective, it's nothing like its namesake video game experience, it certainly nails that nonsense history angle. The very first Civ game had a famous bug where in certain circumstances, the very peaceful computer-controlled Gandhi player would do a 180 and suddenly go all out launching nuclear weaponry. Or did it? People Make Games made a very interesting video on that. You should check it out. If there's one element of the entire Civ video game experience that really encapsulates it, it is that nonsense history. Imagine playing as the English, for example, and never colonizing anything. Or having a vote, realizing you've made a horrible mistake, and then having another one. Tapestry achieves this with tapestry cards, which conveniently are the size of a magnetic tape. I should probably let that joke go. As the game progresses, you'll have the chance to play these to your player board, defining your civilization's direction for its next era. Thus you get combinations like starting out with inventing fire, then going straight into capitalism because why not make all the mistakes at the beginning, realizing that doesn't work and going into colonialism, and then just jumping straight into piracy because nothing matters anymore. Cheery! And I hear what some of you are saying, Evka, I'm not about all this anachronistic mumbo jumbo. I don't want to invent the age of sanitation without first having developed the concept of a toilet, and that's fine. Tapestry might not be a game for you, but I think that it is a perfectly fine thing. Okay, so Tapestry is nothing like its progenitor in gameplay, but then what is it like? Let's give you a rundown. Like in many games, in Tapestry you'll be vying to have the most victory points. Each time your turn comes along, one of the two things you can do is a hard reset because you've run out of resources and you need resources to do things, and you trigger the income phase, which will let you activate whatever abilities your civilization has, play a new Tapestry card, upgrade any tech that you have, trigger any scoring abilities based on how many houses you've built, and then get new resources based on how many houses you've built. Got that? Okay, because all of that barely ever happens, and the real meat of the game is if you choose to not do income and instead advance on one of the game's 4 tracks. I did that in one take. No, I didn't. And that's where things get a little bit tricky to explain, although the game doesn't share that sentiment because the entirety of the rules fits on brief 4 pages printed on the same magical paper as the Wingspan rulebook. After Scythe's manual, which was designed by the same designer, Jamie Stegmaier, I was a little bit disappointed to see this truncated approach because that was one of the best manuals I have ever read, and this is not very adequate at teaching the game, but it is indicative of how simple Tapestry aims to be. Each turn you will choose one of the 4 tracks: exploration, military, technology, or science, and advance on them, wistfully lamenting the absence of culture in this world. Each time you advance, you'll pay the resource cost of your current bracket and execute the ability of whatever space you landed. That part is easy to explain. Executing actions, let's just say that every action has a different effect, making this a game that has nearly as many actions as a Feast for Odin. Thankfully, there is a handy reference sheet that explains all of them, but it will take you at least one game for your brain to absorb a decent portion of what is even possible. Bouncing from one space to another is intoxicating. The phrase kid in a candy store doesn't even quite cut the mustard. I'd liken it more to a kid who was told he was in a candy store, but then every candy was secretly replaced with Ritalin that was dipped in Coca-Cola. The dizzying array of spaces, actions, and potential combinations might seem overwhelming, but it is a genuine delight for someone who loves exploring the unknown, likes to prod things to see what they do, and genuinely gets excited when a plethora of light bulbs starts blinking. Do not despair, there is method to this madness. Each track has an associated mechanism or common actions that are part of the action spaces that you land on. Exploration appropriately lets you expand into new territories at the center of the board. Each time you explore, you place a new tile from a personal supply available to you. As soon as you are allowed to do this, you will experience an emotional tug of war, an irresistible itch that is central to the Tapestry experience. Do you want a resource that will let you go further before you have to reset, or do you want more victory points that will let you climb the ladder of success? If you align the borders of each tile to match the terrain with other existing ones, you'll get 1 victory point per border, and then you will get whatever is depicted at the center of that tile, be it a resource, a new technology card, a new tapestry card, or even one of these dinky little buildings. Naturally, some terrain is more common than others, so a tile with a strong bonus will be harder to match. How many victory points you give up for that bonus is up to you. This emotional seesaw is even starker if you get to conquer, which is an action found on the military track. Conquering lets you expand onto the expanded territory you just expanded onto by placing a little outpost. As soon as you do, you will roll 2 combat dice. One will display a random value of victory points, the other a resource. Your choice. Now let's pop back to the income phase, because much like a good rug, it really ties this tapestry together. Progressing through any given track lets you build buildings associated with that track. Because building each building uncovers a bonus, each income phase you'll get more resources that will help you progress further on that track. Sacks of cash for technology, bulky men for science, communist stars for military, and you need mushrooms to explore. But crucially, you'll also uncover scoring opportunities that are once again tied to said track. Wafting through military, you'll land on spaces like archery, cavalry, or tanks, but each time you'll just plop out an outpost next to your territory. There's even the tiniest smidge of confrontation. If you conquer a territory controlled by your opponent, you will topple their outpost whilst simultaneously placing yours still very much standing. This contracts their territory and at the same time expands yours, and that's important because every income phase you will gain points equal to the number of territories you control twice if you have both of these uncovered, and that's a hefty dose of points cream that you can rub on your face every income phase. Exploration has a similar mechanism, but because the game has no memory of how much you actually explored, you just get a flat rate point bonus. But it's only when we come to the bulky men of science that things get a little bit weird. Yes, these are actual real pieces you'll get in the game, but really it's the entire science track that is weird. The others introduce their core mechanisms right from the get-go and very gently, whereas science is made from very different giblets. The idea behind it is that it will let you propel yourself further in your other endeavors, sometimes rolling a die and telling you on which track you'll move, or sometimes, if you're very far along, just letting you choose. But to even start your trundle towards the world of isotopes and Schwarzschild radiuses, first you'll have to make a sacrifice. The initial steps of the science track will let you advance on the other tracks, but without receiving the bonus. And no, there's nothing clever you can engineer here. Skipping a step can have devastating effects towards whatever strategy you've picked. And even if you do find yourself wanting to skip a particular step, you don't get to choose. You just have to roll the die and eat your vegetables. Horrible, horrible luck vegetables. The gravy here is that once you do get past the vegetables, your hunk of roast beef has some tender, juicy bonuses. Later down the track, rolling the die, advancing and getting the bonus feels like a lavish treat because now you're inching closer towards the end of 2 tracks, but also you might be winning the race for these. Each track is separated into 4 sections. Not only do the sections signify the cost of advancing, but if you're the first person to cross into the new section, you'll get a funky chunky. Anytime you get one of these bulbous beauties or the dinky ones from your player board, you get to place them in your capital. And just like that, Tapestry presents you with another puzzle, and just like in the military and the exploration tracks, it's a choice of getting points or resources, except on the science track, you want to fill up complete rows or columns with buildings in your capital board, ignoring the pre-printed spaces on the board. Cover up an entire quadrant of your capital instead and you'll get a free resource. Ooh, maybe there's a way I can do both. Tapestry is like that waiter at a fancy party with a tray of entrees, and even though you've already had your fill, he's there with the plate going, would you like some more? No thank you, I've already had enough, and actually I need to watch my, I don't know, those are really delicious. Maybe I'll just have another dumpling. And then 5 minutes later, he's still there, waiting, watching. Would you like some more? I could tell you about the technology track with yet another puzzle of grabbing technology cards. I can't actually pick them up. And choosing which one to edge upwards for yet another set of points or bonuses, but by now I think you've got the idea. Instead, I want to draw your attention to these clay rations. Again, that's a portmanteau of clay and creation. Stay with me. No, they are not made of clay, they are plastic. Either way, you shouldn't really eat them. The original sculpts, however, were definitely clay creations from artist Ron Brown. They impressed designer Jamie Stegmaier so much that they served as the basis for this entire game. Jamie wanted to design a game that could house these houses, provide them with a loving home on your board game shelf. And I really wish that he hadn't. They're definitely a Marmite inclusion in terms of aesthetics, but I will admit, I do like them very much. They're quirky, off-kilter, almost funny, and a little bit messy. Basically everything that I am, and I want to give them a hug so much. But my oh my, let me tell you right now that Tapestry is $100 game. And I would guesstimate that all of this plastic makes up about 40% of that cost. It's not just that they are form over function, it's that the form turns out to be lacking. Tapestry's buildings, by the virtue of being more three-dimensionally pronounced, sacrifice the potential of being interesting puzzle pieces. They are either perfect squares, rectangles, which are a kind of square, and if you're really fortunate, once in a blue moon, they have one protruding edge. But even then, they somehow manage to be confusing because unlike cardboard tiles, which can be cut to precisely fit the puzzle they're meant to fit, these don't quite align to the spaces on this board. Far too frequently, I was working towards getting one and then realizing that I couldn't really place it where I wanted to place it. And then you can't even fling them because they're too gosh darn adorable. And they don't make any sense thematically. Far from representing the various stages of history like Roman times, medieval times, or my favorite period, the age of LCD sound system when James Murphy was the king of all humans, these look like a misguided set of Playmobil figures where you get a barn, a police station, and for some reason a space rocket. This mishap is further intensified by the fact that in terms of artwork, Tapestry is gorgeous. Illustrator Andrew Bosley should absolutely pat himself on the back because he's got the best looking game of 2019 in his portfolio. The continent you create at the center of the board with bright pastel colors is inviting. The illustrations on each civilization sheet are inspiring. Many a times when I drew my random starting civilization, I immediately wanted to take them on this journey based on artwork alone without having even read what they do. The player board hits you with glowing hues of magic hour sunrise and ever-present parallel to the dawn of your people. Which is all a very roundabout way of saying that I agree with Jamie Stegmaier that there should definitely be a game that uses these, but this, as an idea, simply outgrew them aesthetically and pragmatically. Looking at Tapestry is a delight and simultaneously a disappointment, because imagining what Mr. Bosley could have done with just some cardboard tiles is a constant reminder how much cheaper and better this game could have been. Let's forget about the price for now. What if it didn't matter? Should you still get this game? Well, there's no easy answer for that. I suspect the Tapestry will delight as many people as it will frustrate, and potentially do both of those. The internet was quick to compare it to Guns Shone Clever, a simple roll and ride game where you advance on tracks that are littered with bonuses, bouncing between them like an inebriated pinball. Advancing on all the tracks all the way to the top is a mathematical impossibility, so you have to pick a couple of them and do your best. Tapestry takes this drunken giant metal marble, grows it tenfold, and unleashes it onto a circus floor full of trapeze artists, livestock, and murderous clowns. Whereas Guns Shone Clever never allowed you to go on whatever path you liked, your choices were hamstrung by dice rolls, introducing much needed variance to what otherwise would have been a mathable puzzle. Tapestry instead injects variance into each step you take, and then it ejects it again. And again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again. Let's set aside the argument that having more than a dozen civilizations with wildly differing powers leads to imbalance. Frankly, there's no way of ever knowing. With so many factors, so many dials, knobs, and levers to manipulate the mechanisms of this game, it would take thousands of samples to get an array of statistical data, and even then there's no way to account for the fact that some people might simply have a skill set that's better suited to doing well in this playground. The argument is nonsensical and unnecessary. The problem isn't whether they feel balanced or imbalanced. The problem is that some of them on a gut reaction level just feel a little bit flabby. Being handed something that feels like it doesn't have the potential to marinate into a good brew means that you're stuck there for a couple of hours trying to make lemonade out of vinegar. And I don't know if you noticed, but vinegar smells. That musk continues to pervade the tracks as you go along them. Whatever faction you have been given will propel you in a certain direction. That's good, but everything else could either immensely reward you for your chosen path or continue to crush you against the weight of every decision you have made. Everything from tapestry cards to die rolls to tile draws to player count to seating order could potentially elicit responses from "oh my god, I can't believe how lucky I got" to "I wish I was doing anything else right now but playing this game." In one of my games, I got to play as the Isolationists, one of the factions I found more engaging. The power lets you place a second outpost each time you conquer a territory. That makes them protected against any incursions in the game, but the icing on the cake is that each time you do this, you will get a resource of your choice. The natural inclination is to do it early so you get the resources you need to grease and oil your engine, but that means that you've likely done it close to your capital rather than the areas you actually need to protect from those incursions. Why is that important? Well, because Isolationists score points at the end of the game based on the size of the territory they manage to create, all comprising an adjoined identical terrain. Not only am I given a clear path in terms of which tracks I should pick to advance on, exploration would give me the necessary tiles to place and surround myself with space, and military would let me place those outposts that I need to place. But you know what? There's enough flexibility in there to deviate. The Isolationists are compelling because there's no one clear path and there's an inherent choice built into the faction I'm playing. But guess what happened next? My very first tapestry card was the Age of Sail. I could not believe it. After our game finished, I looked through the entire deck of tapestry cards and I sincerely doubt there is a better one I could have drawn. Not only does it effectively give me 3 points each time I explore in this area, but it also gives me a cornucopia of exploration tiles full of hills, sand, lakes, forests, mountains, and whatever it is that my heart desires, and naturally 40 points for my faction ability at the end of the game. That, of course, feels amazing, but you know what doesn't? Watching your opponent struggle to draw anything that resembles a cohesive plan, trundling along through tracks with not an ounce of whim or vigor. For every person on my table who had a great time with Tapestry, I could point to another person whose entire game melted into a flubber. Which, you know, I can forgive. Jamie Stegmaier as a designer is more and more in tune with his strengths. Tapestry is a strategy game, but it's zany, fast-paced, and wonkier than a daikon grown in English soil, which I can definitely see some people embracing. What I cannot forgive is some baffling design decisions that, at my most generous, I can call glaring oversights. Why is it that the end of the technology track gives you the option to discard free technology cards for 10 points, whereas the other tracks give you opportunities to discard redundant resources to score some points? The technology track lets you discard the resource that scores you points, creating situations where sometimes you'll discard 9 points to get 10 points, which is okay, but at other times 18 points to get 10 points. Why is it that 2 of the 4 ultimate spaces of each track are such utter disappointments? Why would I want to roll a die 4 times for either no effect, or if I'm lucky, maybe scoring 5 points? Why would I want to draw a new civilization at the end of the game when its effect could be completely meaningless? Why are there factions in this game that are utterly rubbish in a 2-player game? Why wouldn't you put in your rulebook, we don't recommend playing with these factions in the 2-player game? Was the rulebook being 4 pages long really that important? This is just a smattering of effects and abilities that I don't understand the inclusion of, and maybe I'm missing something fundamental. But that's just my generous side talking, and if I were to turn it off for just a second, I would say something like, this game needed more rigorous testing and development before being rushed out to buyers. Ultimately, I would equate Tapestry to an irresponsible parent that leaves a toddler in a giant room filled to the brim with amazing toys and lit candles. Whether it has the time of its life or sets the house on fire is not something it's concerned with, because insurance is probably going to sort it out. I have to sheepishly admit that I did enjoy Tapestry and had fun with it, but I had to turn off my empathy because some of my friends, including Elaine, really didn't. Whether that, along with $100, is a price you're willing to pay, is for you to figure out.